All right, everybody, welcome back. Good morning, and hope you guys are doing really well, staying safe, having a good close to your semester. We only have a few weeks left, obviously, so wishing everybody well. And we're going to get our lecture started in a few minutes here at 11:10. This is the last lecture content meeting that we're going to have, and then after this, we just have 2 review sessions. And then next Thursday's final exam. So we're really getting to the end. And we just have a few more notes to take on for today's class. So you guys are troopers. You really hung in there through a tough semester and a lot of difficulty and all that. But here we are, and I guess you guys could say that you showed a lot of strength getting through this term. So far so good, but we got a little bit of unfinished business, and that's just to take our final and get that done. Don't forget also Thursday you have the last homework due, so you got to make sure to submit that to me before class time Thursday. Hi Veronica, good to see you there. Anybody else that's watching or that's here in the live stream at any time, you can always feel free to say hello. It's always good to hear from you guys. Just pulling up some notes. Okay, cool. All right, yeah, just this is Orange Coast College Critical Thinking, 11:10 to 12:35 noon, 12:35 p.m., whatever. And we're almost ready to go. But thank you guys for showing up already and being set to do this. Okay. Kitty. She's sleeping down there. Guess I should let her sleep. All right. Hi, Carmen. How's it going? Good to see you guys. Hope you had a good weekend. It's May now, so weather's kind of changing. That's always nice. Oh no, don't worry about it. It's fine. Hey, Mason. Mason. I'm not sure proper pronunciation, but I see it here spelled different. Anyways, good to see you too. All right, we're almost ready to roll. Just a minute or so. Hey, good to see you there, Connor. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I guess we're pretty much there at the class time. So to all of you guys watching and attending right now, thanks for being here. Good to see you, and good morning. So it's an important meeting. It's the last day where we're going to have lecture notes. We're finishing out some leftover material on Chapter 9, which is ethics. It's all about ethics and morality. So we're going to finish that now. And then next class, Thursday, we'll do part 1 of our review session for the final. Next week, Tuesday, a week from today, we have part 2 of the review session. So there's 2 installments, part 1 and 2, this Thursday, next Tuesday. Then next Thursday is the final exam. The other thing is, don't forget to turn in your last homework. That's due on Thursday, the 14th. Just submit it to me as an email attachment no later than class time of Thursday. So for you guys, 11:10 a.m. Anytime before that would be okay. I sent out a message saying that I had finished the grading, H1, of the last quiz, which is true, but I'm definitely a little buried in some emails that I have to reply to from a variety of different schools. Other schools are finishing their classes this week, so I have a couple of courses out there where I'm finishing up their finals, and a lot of people are sending me messages related to that. So I'm going to get to your request if you sent me an email asking for your quiz grade. It could be that it's later today. Worst case, it'll be early in the morning tomorrow, but in any case, you'll know your score before Thursday. If you have sent me a request, I'll definitely get to it before Thursday so that you'll know your scores. Okay, then we're really just kind of going to go through today's meeting, and then I'll distribute the study guide for the final over the weekend, or maybe even I'll just do so prior to the weekend, Thursday or Friday. The first review session is going to just use the study guide that we already gave for the first half of the class. So the 2 review sessions are kind of broken down. In the first review session, it's everything up till the midterm, and in the second review session, we're going to look again at all the stuff we've done since then. So you already have one study guide that I sent through Canvas weeks ago before the midterm that we used when we were still studying and getting ready for that. So we're going to take a second look at that review study guide, and then I'll distribute the second one for part 2, and then that'll be our focus next week on the 19th. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions about any of that stuff, but as usual, as always, you have every different opportunity to ask anything, so feel free. If you have questions that pop up in your mind now or later, you can ask me in the live stream or in an email or whatever the case may be. So I'm trying to be as responsive as I can. So those are just some basic announcements. Okay, so let's just kind of review what we did the past few meetings, and then I'll take us through the last few notes on this ethics work. Okay, so chapter 9 is our current chapter, and it's all about ethics. Ethics is the study of morality and moral concepts. That has to do then with, hey Maddie, that has to do with the concept of right and wrong, good and bad, what's moral, what's immoral, what you should do or what you should not do in the moral sense. We talked about moral reasoning. That's when you are the moral judge that makes a decision about what things are right or wrong or what actions that you should or shouldn't do. We talked about moral values versus non-moral values. Hey Bill, nice to see you too. Moral values, values that benefit you, but they also benefit other people and they're considered good for their own sake, like justice or compassion or forgiveness. And then non-moral values, values that are more goal-oriented and self-interested. They're thought of as valuable as a means to an end. So prestige, popularity, wealth, things like that. Those are the moral values. It's important to have both, motivating your everyday life choices and behavior. We talked about the conscience. Hi there, guys. The conscience basically is this internal source of knowledge about what's right and wrong. We should listen to it, pay attention to it. Don't try to silence it or, destroy it. Something that's built into us naturally, but it can be activated by our social environment and the way that we're raised. We talked about the moral sentiments, which are different emotions that people have, which alert them to moral situations. In that mix, we discussed the helper's high, when you help people and you feel good about yourself, feeling a moral outrage when you witness or perceive something unjust and then you get upset because of that. Resentment, when you are the victim of the unjust treatment, and so it's a little more personal for feeling of moral outrage. Guilt versus shame. The bad feeling of doing something wrong is guilt. A bad feeling that comes from breaking a social norm is shame. Then we talked about the development of moral reasoning in people, and the whole discussion was that there are basically 3 phases of that. That there's the pre-conventional stage where you basically just think right and wrong, and morality just has to do with avoiding punishment for yourself. So that's a lot more self-interested. It's kind of just directed at your own best interests and just trying to avoid punishment. Then there's the second stage of conventional moral development, where you basically just want to fit into the norms and conventions that have been set out by society and by your community. And you want to do that to simply fit in and be considered a nice boy or a good girl. So you want to win this socially positive approval and judgment. So that'd be the second phase, where you really care a lot about everybody else's viewpoint. And then the third and highest is post-conventional, where you think that there are moral principles that are universal, but that you can apply them on your own, and that sometimes, anyway, they may even disagree with the viewpoint of society or the community. And also, like, I guess, way back at the beginning, we talked about some basic moral concepts, like what are different types of moral action, morally impermissible, morally permissible, and obligatory. Okay, so that takes us to today. Today's meeting is really all about a couple of additional things on ethics. The number one thing that we're going to discuss today are different types of moral theories. Okay, so there are different theories that have been provided over the different generations, which try to give a sense of what makes an action right and wrong. So some people have views about that. They have specific criteria for what makes an action wrong versus not wrong. So we have to therefore kind of just dig around and think about what these different moral theories are, and at least understand the definitions of what they can be. So moral theories. Theories of ethics, like a theoretical attempt to state what makes an action wrong or what makes an action obligatory, whatever the case may be. Now, there are 2 main types of moral theories. Okay, so one type of moral theory is what is called moral relativism. And the sort of flip side to that, the contrary to that, are what are called theories that are moral universalism. Okay, now what moral relativism says is that morality is relative. It's not objective. It's not universal. What's right or wrong is something that just depends. And what it depends on can differ according to the specific type of moral relativist theory. But that's the big picture idea. So moral relativism, morality is not universal and objective. It is relative. And moral universalism is the opposite. It says that no, actually morality is universal and it is objective. They say that there's an objective moral code that applies to everybody the same way and it never changes. So according to moral universalism, there are facts about morality, not just opinions and feelings, that there is actually like hard truth about what makes actions right and wrong. So they say morality is universal and objective. There is a moral law or code that never changes, that is the same for all people, places, and times. Okay, so 2 different types of moral theory there. This one is moral relativism, which says that morality is not a universal thing. It's not one size fits all. That morality can differ and be different in different conditions. And therefore, so it's not objective, it's not universal, it's relative to something. According to moral relativism, there's really no such thing as a fact about what's right and wrong. There's different standards of morality which are not universal. In moral universalism, though, of course, as you can tell by the name, it's the opposite. No, they do say there's another perspective, different point of view. According to the moral universalist, there really is an objective moral law that doesn't change, that's the same always, forever, and for all people, places, and times. So according to moral universalism, what's right and wrong is set in stone. It doesn't depend on who you are or where you live or what time period that you're growing up in. There's just there's absolute truth in the realm of morality. So we got two different ways of looking at morality, and the next thing to do is to quickly speak about two further subcategories of moral relativism. So there are two types of moral relativism. So as I'm showing you like the structure of this intellectual landscape, there's two types of moral theories, relativism and universalism. And then if we like tunnel and dig into relativism a little bit more specifically, we'll also now reveal that there are two of those kinds. Okay, so there's two kinds of the one kind. There's two types of relativism, which is one of the major branches of ethical thought. So next, let's talk about these two types of relativism for a moment. Yeah. So two types of moral relativism. Okay, so two types of moral relativism. The first one is what we call ethical subjectivism. Okay, and then the other kind is known as cultural relativism. Okay, so to the first here, ethical subjectivism. What is that? Ethical subjectivism basically is this view. It's the view that morality is nothing more than personal opinion. So morality is just personal opinion. And that's it. So what's the answer to the question, is abortion wrong? There's no factual answer. There's just opinions on it. And so to a person who says they think it's wrong, based on their opinion, it's wrong to them. To another person who says there's nothing wrong with that, that's totally morally permissible. Well, relative to that person who thinks otherwise, it's not wrong. But what's the answer, whether it's wrong or not? There's no factual objective answer. There's just diversity of opinion. And so none of them is somehow like the correct one. All right, so that's ethical subjectivism. Morality is nothing more than personal opinion. Okay, now when it comes to this ethical subjectivism idea, some people feel like that makes a lot of sense, because if you just sample the opinions of different people, you notice that a lot of times everyone's not on the same page, that they don't all agree. Some people will say you have a moral obligation to do such an action, and another person will say, no way, there's no obligation, or maybe it's even wrong. Like one person might say that if you took recreational drugs, you're doing something bad. Another person may say there's nothing wrong with that. It's the law that's wrong. On an ethical subjectivist perspective, you kind of don't have a correct answer there. There's just two different people with different opinions. To one person it's wrong, to another person it's not. And that could be on any number of different issues, whether it was social policies and judging their ethical character, judging the ethical evaluation of a person's individual behavior, or any other popular number of topics. Abortion, animals, is it wrong to eat meat? Some people say yes. That's why they say, oh, I'm a vegetarian. Other people say, no way, I love meat, and there's a different status that a human has regarding to rights than animals do. So, look, there's lots of area for disagreement morally, and you'll know that because you're a human that lives in this world, and you see these disagreements play out every day on social media, in everyday public life, and private life. So some people are persuaded on that basis to just claim ethical subjectivism is true. There's no factual answers on morality. There's just opinions all around. But as much as it may seem nice to grant everybody the status of, you have a valid moral opinion and I can't say that there's a wrong answer about it, that may sound like it's very fair-minded and egalitarian and all that, like you're very tolerant and stuff. But there's kind of a dark side to ethical subjectivism too. And hi, Chris, good to see you. Who do you think in this class watching could say, what could be a problem with ethical subjectivism? Can you point out or think of any possible problem there? Like a criticism or a worry, a concern, if people really held this view. Can you imagine what could be considered like a little troubling or even disturbing about the theory of ethical subjectivism? What could be a problem? What could be a criticism here? That's what I'm asking you. So see if you can tell me. Imagine that you find fault with this. What could be the fault? Okay. Yeah, so Carmen, good. You're saying they don't stand for anything they believe is right. Well, I see what you mean, but let me just try and work with that comment a little bit. If you're an ethical subjectivist, you might still have very passionate beliefs about morality. You might still say, like, look, to me, abortion is a terrible thing. It's horrible and it's wrong. So they might still stand up for what they think, but you're kind of along the right lines. I think I sense like a good criticism brewing in your mind. Let's see if anyone else can kind of try and state this or articulate this possible objection. Veronica, you're saying can be passive aggressive. What do you mean by that? I actually don't know what you mean by that. How is passive aggressive related to what we're saying right now? You don't have to be passive aggressive, so I'm not sure what you mean. I just want to understand you. Can you explain that comment? No? We can keep talking, but you'll maybe be able to type it out and I'll see your response in a bit. Anybody else? Okay, so I have my opinion and you have yours. But how is that passive aggressive? Isn't that just stating what your opinion is in the dialogue with another human being? I don't know. Passive aggressive is like you don't want to tell somebody what you think or feel, so you try and indicate that to them through indirect means. But if a person is an ethical subjectivist, they would just tell you what they think. I don't know. I don't see the connection, so I can't really follow you there. But let's continue, guys. You should be able to tell me this, just using logic and common sense. What could be problematic or worrisome about ethical subjectivism? If you can't tell me, I'm going to try and feed it to you, but let's see. Tell me, what could be problematic? So you understand what it says? It says morality is nothing more than a personal opinion. If that was true, if a person thought that that's the way morality worked, can you tell me what might be worrisome or problematic or disturbing or even dangerous about that? What could be the issue here with ethical subjectivism? Morality is personal opinion, right? Okay, that's what it says. What do you find wrong about that, if anything? Okay, so you say there's no agreement with what is truly right and wrong. Well, that's not really a criticism. That's what the ethical subjectivist is saying. They say, well, there's no agreement, and therefore there's no answer. There's just opinions. What's the problem with saying that there's only opinions and no facts about morality? Or are you just so postmodern, in the way you've been raised to think everyone's opinion is equal, so you can't even think of a criticism? You're just like, no, that sounds fair. People have different opinions. Why am I supposed to say there's anything wrong with that? I'm telling you, tell me what could be wrong with that. If everyone's opinion is equal, and these ethical opinions don't have any objective force, then what could be the problem? Okay, so you say it could stop forward movement. I guess I sort of see what you mean. Why though? Why would it stop forward movement? Why would that happen? What do you mean by forward movement, first of all? And how is ethical subjectivism an obstacle to that? Just asking, because you said it. So it's your idea. You'll write it out and we'll see it. But as you're doing that, to all the rest, I have my question, which you have not answered. Okay, let's see what you've written now, Veronica. Because agreeing to disagree is not making a decision. Yeah, you're still not getting it though. Carmen, you wouldn't be able to debate properly with them. I mean, you could debate with the person. You could say, look, here are the reasons why I believe that that is the wrong opinion to hold. You could still have a debate. It would be kind of like, in a way, you might wonder what's the point of the debate, though, because even if I convince you, there's no right answer. But there's a more fundamental problem here. So I want someone to say it, because it should not be so hard to point out. Okay, everyone will have their opinion, so people could do anything they want according to what they believe is right and would not be wrong because that is what they believe is right. Exactly. Very good point, and that's what I'm talking about. Everybody, come on. Let me get it out of you through a series of dialectical questions like Socrates would do. Let me ask you right now, is it wrong to commit murder? What if I want to go and kill school children? Is that wrong? What do you say? Simple question. Is that a wrong thing, or is that perfectly fine? Is that good even? Is it wrong or not wrong to kill innocent people? Okay, Veronica, Sam, you're saying yes, that's wrong. Now, to an ethical subjectivist, what's the answer? Is it wrong? To the ethical subjectivist, what's the answer? Is it really wrong? All they can say is, well, you can't really claim that anything's objectively not wrong to, let's say, just slaughter innocent people. If you're an ethical subjectivist, to whom is it not a wrong thing to do when we talk about killing of innocent people? Depends on the motive or the situation, right? So I don't know about, well, it depends on the person is what you should be saying. So take the serial killer, right? There are serial killers out there. They're out there among us right now. Sorry to say that, but it's true. Kind of, I guess, constrained right now because they're all stuck at home, but whatever. There are people out there that would kill even you, right? Now, to the killer, it's not wrong because they believe in what they're doing. Why else would they do it? Talk to the serial killer. Why do you kill people? Oh, it's fun. You know, that's like hunting, but these are the most sophisticated creatures to hunt. They fight the hardest. They're the smartest ones. So there's this like supreme pleasure that comes from dominating and ending their life. That's why it's so great. I think everyone should be a killer. This is the killer speaking, right? Now, if a killer says that, don't you want to say, you're just messed up and you're warped. Your mentality is like psychopathic. That's a bad thing that you're saying. You don't want to have to say, well, look, I have my opinion and you have yours. I say it's wrong to kill and you say it's a good thing. So let's just have our different views. Don't you want to say something a little too deviant and immoral behavior when you claim ethical subjectivism? You can't make a robust moral criticism. You cannot say, look, that is just fundamentally wrong. All you can say is most people in society don't think that's good, and so like the greater opinion is that it's wrong. That's weak stuff. Just saying we feel like it's wrong to rape people, commit genocide, murder, torture little children. You shouldn't have to think, well, that's just opinion-based. Isn't there like a feeling within you somewhere that that is absolutely wrong, and it's not just up to debate, and it's not just a personal opinion that you might have, right? We don't want to give the like psychopathic serial killers and like racists and all that sexist people out there a platform and saying like, well, you have your opinions and to some people they're valid, so I guess I have to respect them. No. Okay, so a problem with ethical subjectivism, I hope it's now clear to you, that it deprives you of the ability to say that anything's actually wrong, even things that are egregiously wrong and like obviously so. So if you're a person who feels like there's got to be some things in this world that are factually wrong and not just a personal opinion that they're wrong, but in and of themselves they're wrong, if you feel that way, then you really can't vibe with this ethical subjectivism because all it's going to allow you to say is, well, to me it's wrong and maybe other people have a different point of view. Do you really want to have to think that there's any validity to the serial killer or the rapist in terms of what they think is a good action? Probably not, or at least I would hope not. So that's a possible criticism here. We live in a world where you're supposed to have tolerance and open-mindedness to diversity of opinion and different people's backgrounds and beliefs, and that's fair and that's a good thing. But there's a saying that I learned, which is that you should have an open mind, but not so wide open that your brain just falls right out of your head, right? There's still certain facts. So open-mindedness only goes so far. You still have to have certain limits beyond which you say, well, that's where we can't grant a valid opinion to a person who holds such a terribly wrong set of views. So anyways, ethical subjectivism has its appeal because we notice that there is a lot of disagreement over a lot of moral issues, but it strains credibility to some people anyway because it doesn't allow us to say something which many find obviously true, and that is that there must be some kind of basic facts about morality. Okay, well then there's cultural relativism. Let's talk about cultural relativism next. It's another variety of moral relativism. It's slightly different than this one. So cultural relativism just says this, that morality, it doesn't depend on the individual opinion. So that's not ethical subjectivism. Instead, it says it's relative, but it's relative to the social norms and customs of your culture. Okay, so they say that morality is based on social and cultural norms. So that's a different type of relativism. The same point, though, is found in both, that there's no objective morality. So with ethical subjectivism, it's like the most radically individualistic and subjective, because it just depends on personal opinion. Cultural relativism, it locates the relativity at a slightly larger source, which is the society that one is a part of, okay? So it avoids some of the problems with ethical subjectivism, but it still has some similar problems of its own. So for example, let me ask you like this question. I asked you earlier, is killing innocent people wrong according to ethical subjectivism? And that was kind of like a trick question, because what you had to notice and what you eventually did see is that there's no like factual answer to that. The answer is it depends on the person. So if you're talking to the serial killer, then serial killing is good and right. And if you're talking to the normal, well-adjusted, healthy human being that finds that terrible, then they'll say, no, it's wrong. So we can't have like some kind of general answer. With cultural relativism, though, let me ask you this. Speaking from the point of view of the United States right now, 2020, our culture, our society, is it wrong to kill innocent people? Is murder of innocent people wrong, according to cultural relativism, relative to current day United States? What do you say? This, I hope, is easy, but let's just see. Killing people that are innocent, that don't deserve it. Is that wrong on cultural relativism? Question, see what you can tell me. It's a yes or no, pretty much. Yes, it is. Okay, correct. But what's the reason, right? Tell me the answer to that. What is the reason then that it's wrong according to the definition of the concept? We could just say that. Why is it wrong in my culture, in your culture right now, to kill innocent people? According to this definition, cultural relativism, we would say that yes, it's wrong, but the reason is why. It's clear enough. Just tell me though. So it's wrong to do that. You're saying yes. But the reason though. Veronica, lives matter, I understand that, but I'm not talking about the racial politics of the police brutality issue, which is an interesting separate issue. It's because in our society, we regard it as immoral. It's because we have penalties that we attach to that behavior, right? So it's like if you go out and you feel free to do that, you're going to get apprehended and you're going to be either executed or placed in prison. So the society has placed a standard, right? And generally speaking, everyone obeys that standard. But when a few deviant people step out of line, our society doesn't tolerate it and say, well, you know, you had your opinion and that's fair and just got to grant you the freedom to do what you want. No, our society condemns the behavior. It's punishable under the law. So it's wrong. But it's because of the social and cultural standards that we've placed, which judge it to be wrong. So in our society, if there is a crazy serial killer, and sadly enough there are, right? We've seen that happen. That person may say, well, I believe in what I'm doing. I don't think it's wrong. But they're living in a society that rejects that kind of conduct. So the cultural standard is what matters on this view. So we would say that relative to this world we are in, this society that we're in, that is wrong. But there are still these other problems. And Veronica, you say, I didn't mean it as political. I meant it as lives are important to society. Oh, no. But I mean, I don't even disagree with that. I mean, I'm just saying like the conspicuous phrase lives matter. We know it's bound up with the advocacy against racial injustice when it comes to apprehending people or treating them with a greater degree of suspicion and fear based on their, racial appearance or phenotype. So I don't think it's an invalid point to make, but I just wanted to make sure that we're thinking of the same concept when I'm asking about killing, just in the general case of killing. Now, let me ask a different question, okay? What about marrying a child bride? Is that wrong according to cultural relativism? Is it wrong or not to marry, a child? a child bride. Adult man marrying child bride. So you're saying it is wrong in our society. Good. And yes, that's a cultural norm in the West. Even though we do have states that differ. When I talk about children, maybe let's just say like significantly young, like 12 or 13. So at any rate, yeah, it's wrong. But in the cultural relativism way of looking at things, is it wrong in other cultures which practice that as an expected rite of passage into adulthood? No. I mean, and there are like indigenous cultures in places around the world which have got radically different view about what's a normal or moral practice, okay? So like the concept of marrying a child, which would be considered like a pedophilic act here and like disgusting and rejected to the maximum by our cultural standards. There are other cultures which would not say the same thing. And, you know, so cultural relativism also has some limitations. If you find that there's behavior anywhere in the world which you say, I don't care who does it, where they're doing it, that's wrong to do, then cultural relativism is still not giving you enough strength behind that's a different society with different morals. So it's not wrong there and it is wrong here, and that's all that can be said about it. But to a lot of people, that's just not true either. You know, like, are there parts of the world that have ever or still ever practiced sacrifice of human beings to like appease the gods? I mean, child sacrifice has happened, and it's been a community practice that some parts of the world, you know, believed for whatever superstitious reasons was a necessary condition to win the favor of some type of god, right? But of course, if that were to happen here, it would be rejected as an abhorrent act of murder of a child. So, and opposite standards could apply to us. Are there parts of the world, you know, where things that we accept here are considered egregiously wrong? Yes. So the main point I'm trying to make here is that cultural relativism only goes so far. It doesn't say that the individual psychopath has validity to what they're saying when they live in a culture that rejects their conduct. But the culture itself at large cannot claim that its standards are somehow like objectively correct or morally righteous. So, period, not just wrong to me and to Western, you know, citizens, then you'd have to reach for some kind of moral universalism. The other problem with cultural relativism today, but in the United States, because we fought a war over that and we've added amendments to the Bill of Rights. So slavery is just generally regarded today as a terrible act that we should never have done. But of course, it was a normal practice, which was legal and available in the beginning of American history. So what's the cultural relativist to say? That it wasn't wrong back then when it was normal, and now it's wrong because our opinions have changed as a society. But if it wasn't wrong to begin with, what made it become wrong when we changed the laws? Or why should the laws have changed if it's all just based on relativity and not like an objective moral basis? You would think that it was always wrong to practice slavery. And that's the reason that it was abolished, because people recognized that the institution was immoral. Not that they thought it's moral until we abolish it, and then it becomes immoral. Okay, so there's all these different possible, you know, complicated criticisms, or I don't know if I should say complicated. In a way, they're pretty simple-minded criticisms of these two types of moral relativism. They deprive you of the ability to make a moral judgment that reaches beyond just what's moral to me or what's moral to my society. So if you believe that there's something deeper about morality, like something that's really objectively wrong or not wrong, then you have to look at the alternative, which is moral universalism. So now I kind of want to just speak to you guys for a little while about what are a couple of very well understood and well discussed versions of moral universalism. So we kind of can contrast this relativistic stuff against the universalist way of thinking about ethics. Okay. So now it's all about moral universalism for a bit. Now, one type of moral universalist theory comes to us from a British philosopher of the 19th century. It's called utilitarianism. Okay, so you see that big fancy looking word there, utilitarianism. That's one major theory of ethics, which is a moral universalist approach. And so it does say that ethics is objective and that there's a factual basis to our moral judgments and beliefs. Now, the founder of utilitarianism, well, there's sort of two of them. One of them is this guy, Jeremy Bentham. Bentham lived from 1748 to 1832. (1748 to 1832). He was a British philosopher, and he's known as like the first kind of major head honcho philosopher to talk about this ethical theory of utilitarianism. He started it off pretty much, but then following after him was another British philosopher who I think kind of carried the torch a lot further and gave a lot further detail and analysis to the concept. So his name, the second guy, the sort of other co-founding father of the philosophy, is this man, John Stuart Mill. Yeah, John Stuart Mill. He lived from 1806 to 1873. So you can see the dates of his life. He's a little later in history than Bentham, who historically precedes him by like a couple of generations there. John Stuart Mill is the one who I think of as like the major figure associated with this philosophy, but Bentham is also often mentioned. Mill had an interesting life. So he was a British philosopher and political economist. He also, during his life, was briefly a member of the Parliament. So that's like the British equivalent of our congressional system here. So he was a member of government for a little while. And he thought that the state should not have any more power than is necessary to maintain civil order, but no more than that. So, like, for example, if you wanted to do something that that only affected your own self-interest but didn't harm anybody else, according to Mill and libertarian thinking, you should be allowed to do that, free from oversight or management by the state. So, like, for example, if a person wanted to gamble, seek prostitution, or use drugs, those are either consensual or purely self-regarding acts that cannot harm others aside from the person doing it. So in Mill's mind, people should be given the freedom and the liberty to do as they see fit, whether it's drinking alcohol, gambling, or whatever. But he was also a person who held certain progressive views relative to the time that he lived. Like, he thought that women should be allowed to vote everywhere, even though that wasn't established in the United States until 1920. He thought that slavery should be globally abolished. And so he was kind of a champion of liberty and freedom and all of that. He even wrote a famous essay called On Liberty, which is another one of his writings. But his ethical material on utilitarianism is probably what he's most well known for. So I'm going to try and just give you some of the very basic details of the theory. So what utilitarianism says is that the right action, what the moral action is whichever action that creates the most happiness for the greatest number of people. So it just says, act always to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness for the greatest number of people. So right there, you see the core conviction or belief of utilitarian philosophy. If you were going to live by this standard, if this was going to be your moral compass that you operated with, then here's how you would be advised to act. Every time you have a choice facing you, and you have a variety of options, like say you have 4 options, A, B, C, and D, and your thought is, well, which one is the right thing? What's the morally right choice for me between those options? The utilitarian would say this, okay, take measure of what the overall amount of happiness is that would be the byproduct of each of those different possible actions, okay? And then whichever one would generate the most overall happiness for all affected, there is your moral obligation. You should do that one. The other ones that yield or generate less total happiness, sometimes it's called utility or pleasure. If they generate less total of that, then they're, by comparison, morally impermissible. So if you were operating this way in life, every decision, from the biggest to the smallest, would be made with concern for which one is going to create the most overall happiness for the greatest number of people. Yeah? So if you're like trying to make a decision about what toppings to order on a pizza, you try to make that decision with concern for which set of toppings would generate the most pleasure for the group that's going to consume it, okay? For example, like that was just one trivial case of a decision, not of any weighty or big moral importance, but it could be made along the same principles as we see here in this statement. Let me try to give you a quick way of thinking about that in a concrete sense. So we saw the definition. We know that it's coming from Mill/Bentham. I'm going to try to draw for you a little graph that can help make this, I think, more specific for you. So imagine that we have got this square here. You should put such a square in your notes. And we create 4 cross sections like that horizontally, and then 4 cross sections vertically like so. So now we have a grid which contains 16 boxes within the grid, okay? Now, on the left here, I'm going to put 4 names from 4 people here in this live stream. So let's get a little interactive, if you don't mind. To the people who would like to give me the names so I can put it in the graph, you don't have any major obligations or commitments. It'll just help me to put some information there that makes this relatable. So who here would be willing to let me put their name on the graph and then ask you quick here? So let's see who's the first 4. Diffusion of responsibility. Are you going to do it, or are you going to wait for everybody else? Let's see what you do. TikTok, as in looking at the clock, not the app. What's up? Let's see. Okay, Carmen, we got 1. Sam, another. Carmen, here you are. Sam, that's you. Next up, Veronica. Oh, well, Veronica, here's what I did ask. Sorry for you losing connection, but I'm asking for volunteers, maybe you're going to be one of them, to give me the name so I can put it on this graph, and then we'll continue and proceed from there. I have 2 so far, Carmen and Sam. I know there's more than 2 more other people. So come on, you shy people, and say something. Okay, Chris. No, well, never mind, Chris. You're talking about your internet cutting out. Is everybody here? Everybody able to hear me? Everybody able to see me right now? You can let me know if you're having a problem, okay? But I still need those 2 names. So please do give me the names. Nobody wants to be picked on and called out and be like, hey, you're going to be on this thing. Okay, good. Thank you. And then one more. For the top, so those are the 4 horizontal rows. Carmen, Sam, Mason, and Bill. Okay? Up here at the top, I'm going to place 4 different types of pizza. Okay? So you guys know that there's a lot of different types of pizza. If you never tried pizza, I highly recommend it. It's a good dinner entree. But anyway, back to the example. What's one type of pizza topping that everybody's heard of, that everyone knows of? So just give me a couple of different possibility toppings. Okay, pepperoni. P for pepperoni. That's 1. Now give me another one different from pepperoni. A different option. So we got pepperoni. We need 3 more. I see mushrooms. Okay, that's fine. M for mushrooms. That's the second column. Let's go to the next. What's the next one? What else do you have for me? Sausage. Okay. Pepperoni, mushroom, sausage, and I just need 1 more. So let me get 1 more. Bacon. Okay. Isn't it similar to pepperoni and sausage, though? You really need a 3rd type of meat? Anyway, that's fine. Bacon. Okay. So look, there's 4 types of pizzas here in this grid, in this graph. Okay. So this is pepperoni, mushroom, sausage, bacon. There's 4 students that are like in the dinner party, as it were. Okay. I see you saying pineapple and calling it out. I would have put it, but P is already very similar to pepperoni. And so for the sake of clarity, using a different letter. But pineapple is no problem to me. I know it's something that people have very powerful opinions on. But anyways, next up, to the 4 people here, okay, guys, Carmen, Sam, Mason, and Bill, You see your name on the graph. I want you to think about this question, because I'll ask you this in a minute. When you see these 4 types of pizza here, I want you to think about your preferences between those 4. And I want you to just give me a number. Now, this number that I'm going to put in that box, it's going to be between, sorry to mention pineapple, Sam, but anyway, yeah. We're going to place a number in each box, which is between 0 and 50s, just so that we have a standard range. Now, each box, can we see, links a name to a pizza topping, okay? So like this box, for example, stands for Sam mushroom. This box stands for like Carmen sausage, okay? Now, sorry, my cat, I gotta open the door for probably right back. Okay. So yeah, sorry, back to what you need to know. The number represents the amount of happiness or pleasure, we could say, that individual would get or receive if this choice of pizza topping was made. So basically, I want you guys here that are on the graph to score your preferences here by giving me a number between 0 and 50, which signifies the amount of pleasure that would yield for you. So like basically, if you like pepperoni twice as much as mushroom, then the number should indicate that. So I mean, like depending on your intensity of pleasure, if this is like a 40 and you thought mushroom is not as pleasurable to half the extent, then that'd be like a 20. Okay, and so like 50 in this 0 to 50 matrix will stand for like the most pleasure that you could receive. That's like your favorite pizza. 0 means you don't like it at all and it doesn't please you at all to eat it. And everything in between 0 and 50 are the shades of gray, like the degree of pleasure or amount, okay? So it may seem a little artificial to us to try and quantify pleasure by a number, like 10 units versus 20 units versus 30, but we gotta at least see your breakdown with these 4 things. So let's start with pepperoni. Tell me, pepperoni, pleasure quantity between 0 and 50, Carmen. Just tell me what your number is. You gotta think. All the other people too, Sam, Mason, Bill, start reasoning about that if you can now, so you're ready to give me your answers when I'm calling on you. But I want to go one by one. So Carmen, first of all, so you say 35 for pepperoni. Okay, good. Next up is mushroom. Okay, so we're going from left to right. So think about the next one. What's mushroom for you, Carmen? Is it better or worse? I mean, what's the number? You say 35 for pepperoni. It's a solid choice then. I guess you find some pleasure in it, more than average. So 10, it's a big drop. No love for mushroom? Okay, that's fine. Some people find them gross. I don't know. I kind of like them, but it's okay. So next up, sausage. What's that? You gave me 35 and 10 so far. What about that sausage? What's that all about, pleasure-wise? 50. Okay, you must be a big fan of that one. So that's way up there. And then if it's bacon, do you have anything about that? Any? Well, you're gonna give me a number. What's the number for bacon? Tough call, huh? Let me know. What do you have? 25. Okay. All right. Not bad. So what we see here is the breakdown of Carmen's preferences assigned the quantity of pleasure derived from your own interest. Okay. Keep in mind, you know, each one of us as human beings have different preferences and interests. Like what I find the most pleasurable and interesting may be not the same to you, and vice versa. That could be when it comes to music, food, film, clothing. We're going from left to right. So starting with pepperoni, what's the number for you? Just let me know, Sam. What is it? 45, 5, 30, 50. Okay, right there. So it seems like for you, it's all about bacon pizza. Little unconventional choice. I mean, they don't even have bacon pizza everywhere, but that's fair. Anyway, so 50 there. Slight second place, close second place runner-up is pepperoni and sausage, and like almost insignificant amount of pleasure for mushroom. Once again, no love for the mushroom, but we'll see who else is on the list. So good. Thanks so much, Sam. Now we're moving to Mason. Mason, same question. Starting here left to right, I need 4 numbers. That's your specific values. Okay, so 35, 35, 30, 35. Ooh, very tough and judicious decision maker when it comes to this. From your perspective, if it's pepperoni, mushroom, or bacon, it's just a wash. They're all equally pleasurable. But if you had to choose, you have slight less interest in sausage. Okay, that's no problem. Good. So when we get to Bill, last one, Bill, and I'm asking you that same question, let's just hear it. What is the number here going from left to right? So pepperoni, mushroom, sausage, bacon, blank, 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 blank. What are those 4 digits from you, Bill? Okay, so you're giving me 35, 30, 45, 35. 35, 30, 45, and then finally 35. Okay, good. So now the grid's filled in, and if you're like a utilitarian decision maker and you like apply this principle to your conduct, then how do you think the choice would be made here? Well, because we have a graph with some conveniently placed values in it, we actually just have to do a simple mathematical operation, and then that will give us our answer as to what is the right action here. What do you think I have to do mathematically to get to the correct outcome? I have to do a little bit of addition, and what do I have to add up? Can you think about that? The next step to get to the end of this example. I have to end up making a decision about which pizza topping to order based on which one would generate the most overall happiness. Veronica, good that you say that. I don't want to leap too far ahead of all of the students all at once. So just tell me what I have to first do before I can judge about the sausage. I have to add. And I have to add up. So the 4 totals here, there are 4 vertical columns, which will produce 4 sums at the bottom. Okay? So I simply have to add the 4 amounts, get a total, and then look at the 4 totals, and whichever one is the biggest number in total would be the option that I'm morally obligated to choose as a utilitarian. So first of all, okay, pepperoni, 35, 35, 70, 35, 105 plus 45, 150. Right? Yeah, okay, now here. 10, 15 plus 35, 50 plus 30 is 80. Now this case, 50, 80, 110, 155. And then finally here, 75, 110, 145. Right? 70, 120, yeah. Okay, good. So now, we've added the amounts up, and you see the totals here, 150, 180, 155, 145. So what is the right action? Veronica, I guess you've already said it. The right action to a utilitarian is sausage. Why? Because it generates the highest yield of total pleasure for all affected in the choice situation. And so I'm just trying to show you guys like a concrete example of how this reasoning process would play out in a practical scenario. If you're a utilitarian, you're always directing your attention to this question. Which option that I'm looking at here would create the most overall happiness for everybody, right? And in a situation where there are other people involved, you have to consider everyone's assorted preferences and then act in accordance with them. Now, there are other ethical theories. Another theory of ethics is called hedonism, which is not the most popular theory in ethics, and I think it's probably a good reason for that because it sounds just much more like egocentrism and selfishness. But hedonism says the right action is whatever generates the most happiness, but just for you, the individual. So it basically says put on blinders and ignore other people and just do whatever makes you happiest in every single situation. But obviously, if that's the moral standard, then it doesn't provide much normative guidance because usually ethics tells us how we ought to act in a morally ideal situation. Whereas hedonism says, just do whatever you feel like doing anyway, because that's what's going to give you the most pleasure. Now, so suppose that you're like, Mason in this situation. Are you happy about the result? Not really, because that's his least favorite choice, but it's the one that dominates in terms of creating the most overall utility. So as a utilitarian, sometimes you won't get your way. Sometimes your most favorable choice or selection in terms of what to do won't be the one that creates maximum utility. But as a utilitarian, in those cases, you're supposed to take one for the team or something in order to get to the outcome that creates more overall happiness. To utilitarians, happiness and pleasure is like the only thing that we all pursue anyway. If you ask yourself why you get up out of bed in the morning or do anything, it's because you believe that the things that you do are going to produce happiness for you. Like, why are you even taking this class? I'm sure that it's because you believe it's part of a larger goal to get a degree, to get some type of good career and a future that's promising for you established. So even when things are not so fun in the moment, like having to take classes and exams and perform in school, the results that you're trying to get from them are supposed to be pleasurable, or else why would you do them? So what Mill believes is that we're already, each one of us, in the pursuit of our personal happiness and pleasure. And therefore, pleasure seems to be the good. So why not make more of it rather than less for all affected by your choices and not merely yourself? Now, the scenario I provide here is a pretty basic situation of ordering pizza. It's not like war and peace, life and death. But if you were a utilitarian moral thinker, then all decisions, including those that involve life and liberty, and the question is, should I vote to pass or defeat the bill, right? Do I vote yes or no on the bill? If you're a utilitarian legislator, then you'd be thinking about the two cases. What happens in society if the bill is passed? What, on the other hand, happens in society if the bill is not passed? And based on what you think would create the greater amount of total overall happiness for all members of society, then you would vote based on that determination. So, you know, big time decisions and little time decisions can both and equally be made by means of the logic supplied in utilitarian ethics. A criticism that is sometimes made of this theory is that it doesn't say to us that there's anything that's ever absolutely ruled out, though, as long as it generates the most overall happiness. That is certainly something that I find to be a fair point of criticism. Japan dropping an atomic bomb on Pearl Harbor, we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan after they attacked Pearl Harbor in retaliation for the attack. Now, some scholars, historians, ethicists debate the wisdom and the morality of using nuclear weapons to reply to the attack on Pearl Harbor. But I think the consensus view of most Americans anyway, and most American historians, is that it was morally justified to do that. Now, question, according to utilitarian thinking, what could be the moral defense of deciding to use those weapons? How could the utilitarians say that it was actually a good and righteous thing to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? What would be the utilitarian moral justification for that? How could it be claimed that doing that was better than the alternative of not doing it? Let's think about that through the prism of this utilitarian view. How could it be claimed that it was good and right? I'm not saying whether I agree with that or not. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But suppose that a person is saying, yes, it was morally justified to do that. What would be the argument if it's coming from a utilitarian school of thought? The reason why we could say it was not wrong to detonate those bombs, to drop them. What would be the reason? Tell me what you think could be the possible reason that it was not wrong, and even maybe good and right, to drop those weapons. What would be the utilitarian reason? Because what's utilitarianism say? Do whatever you got to do to create the most overall human happiness. So how could they say, according to that this was in fact a good moral choice? So I mean, I'm asking you the question, but you have to answer it, because I can't let a person maybe say that that was a good thing. What could be that reason? Just tell me. Or you could just tell me what you think. I mean, if you don't have an ability to interpret the theory and then give an answer based on it. Okay, to protect more Americans. No, because utilitarianism doesn't say anything about Americans. It just says promote the most overall happiness to all human beings. So no, it's not just to protect more Americans, but it does have something to do with promoting the greatest amount of overall happiness, regardless of whether somebody's an American or not. So you're getting closer, but how could it be judged that it would be better to drop those atomic bombs than not doing so, if your goal overall is to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness? What would be the alternative, maybe, to having dropped the bombs? Just think about it. To end the war faster. Good, Maddie. Okay. And that is the exact reason that was provided by people that are supportive of that decision. So suppose that the bombs were not used. The argument goes that in that case, you have a dedicated enemy unwilling to surrender. That would drag the war on for an indefinitely longer time period. And therefore, by the immediate cessation of the war brought about by the very forceful use of those weapons. Although it does kill a lot of people and instantaneously, like 100,000 people vaporized by the use of the weapons, the total death count on both sides could have been more if the war was not immediately ended by those weapons and instead allowed to drag on much longer, and therefore also perhaps leading to a more conventional ground invasion by US forces and allies. So basically, if the thought is let's try and minimize the extent of this war and the total destructiveness and body count, then even a choice involving the deliberate use of weapons which are known to kill a lot of people could be seen as better than the alternative, like the lesser of two evils, right? A necessary evil type scenario. Now, that could be seen as a moral criticism of utilitarianism, like it's willing to even allow the death of people if the alternative is even worse. Some people would see that as like a strength of the view, that it's flexible enough to permit the commission of necessary evils, whereas a more high-minded moral theory might say, no, those are forbidden always. In the case of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, that might sound like it tends to be a little more supportive of the utilitarian theory. I don't know what your view is about the use of the weapons. If you disagree with the choice, then you might have reason to find fault with utilitarianism too. But there are other scenarios where utilitarianism seems in even worse shape. Like, suppose that there was 5 people dying of organ failures, and there was just this like one homeless person that's perfectly healthy, but they had all the organs that those 5 would need. Suppose that these 5 people have big families and they're major contributors to society, and the homeless person, you know, they're not really hurting anybody, but they're also not doing anything for anybody. And so if you killed the one, you could split their organs off into 5 and save 5 lives. Now, on a utilitarian basis, just purely utilitarian, you might say, well, that's more total happiness because the alternative is 5 die and 1 homeless guy lives. And if we kill him, then 1 homeless guy dies and 5 productive citizens live. But obviously, it's got to stop somewhere. You know, at what point do you say you can't just do anything to promote most overall utility? Otherwise, we'd have a bunch of Robin Hoods out there too, you know, stealing things from very wealthy merchants, flipping the black market product back into, you know, their communities, and then using them to pay for people that are poorer and pay their way. Could that be morally justified by utilitarianism? Maybe, because the loss of utility to the wealthy person is overcompensated by the value of that wealth to a poorer person. But most of us would say that just theft and killing of innocent people to secure organs and stuff would be fundamentally wrong. So although utilitarianism has its basis in the maximization of overall happiness, some people find fault with it because it places no guardrails on what type of actions in principle are allowed as a means to the end of promoting the most overall happiness. Yeah, so just some interesting background on that. Now, I wanted to say something about another major moral theory that is oftentimes contrasted with the utilitarian one. A different ethical approach comes from this man, Immanuel Kant. Now, Kant was a German philosopher who lived from 1724 till 1804. And he is kind of the forefather of an ethical system which has taken his namesake, which is called Kantianism. Now, Kantian ethics is different from utilitarian ethics because utilitarians are worried about the consequences of the things that you do, the results. They're results-oriented. So if the results will be better for everybody in terms of more happiness, that's what you ought to do. In the Kantian approach, it's not results-oriented at all. Instead, it's based on the intention that you have. So it says act with a good intention and with a good will. And from that point on, whatever the consequences are don't really matter. We judge you based on your will, not based on the results. So Kant would say try to act with a good will. But he has a very technical description of what it means to act with a good will. He says reason, that we've all got within us as humans, can discover the moral law and therefore what we have a duty to obey when we simply reflect on this principle, which is called the categorical imperative. So the categorical imperative is this rational principle which Kant thinks that our mind can like unlock and understand, and that can be used to direct us towards the correct moral behavior in any situation. So the categorical imperative is like the core of his philosophy. And here's what it says. Act always so that, now it's a little wordy for a moment, so just bear with me as I write this, but what it says is act always so that the maxim which describes could be willed to be a universal law. So there's a few little terms, jargon in here that have to be clarified. What is a maxim, and what would it be? What would it mean for a maxim to be able to be a universal law? In other words, what he's saying there is, it's only morally permitted, it's only okay to do things that it would also be okay or possible for everybody to do. So when you do actions, make sure that the action that you're doing could be done by everybody. Like, for example, suppose there's a long line, right? And you know how it is. Well, sometimes I guess we still have to wait in lines, like to get in the grocery store and stuff, but like waiting in line for a concert and everything, that's for now a thing of the past. But anyway, if you're waiting in a long line, you can get impatient. It's not so fun having to wait there and take your time, even though we've got a lot of things to distract us with our smartphones and everything. Suppose you're one of those impatient persons that just doesn't want to have to wait that long in the long line. So you think of this thought, I should just cut to the front, and then I won't wait so long. Now, when the person cuts to the front, that only works if they're the only one doing it, right? With everyone else maintaining and respecting the rule of the line and staying in their single file position, then the cutter can gain an advantage over them by cutting. But what would happen if everybody cut? Would there still even be a line? No. It would instead devolve into like a chaotic riot towards the entrance of the establishment, whatever it is. So it's not possible for everybody to cut, because if that happens, there's no longer any line in the first place. Furthermore, what about the person who cut in the first place? If everybody cut, then what would happen once they cut everyone? They would simply be recut by all the others, and they would gain no new position closer to the entrance. So that's an action that's wrong, according to Kant. And he says your reason itself knows that, because when you think about what would happen if everybody did it, you see the system falling apart altogether. So basically, in other words, only do actions that it would be possible for everybody to do. But when you do something that would not work if everybody did it, then it's like you're creating an exception to the rule for yourself, and you're not supposed to do that. The moral law is supposed to be obeyed, and it's not possible to act in a way as an individual that everybody could not act in and still have a coherent system that we all want to live in. Another case. Suppose that I want to borrow money from somebody in order to get extra cash, but I don't want to actually pay it back. Nevertheless, I know that the only reason they will even give me the loan is if I make a promise to pay it back, okay? So I say to them, hey, can you loan me 20 bucks? Promise you I'll pay it back. And they say, sure, here you go. But in my mind, I'm thinking, haha, I will never pay that back. I'm just telling you that. Now, in that case, my maxim, my principle of action is, I will lie when I want extra money. I will lie about repaying a loan when I want someone to give me money. If that became the universal law, meaning that if everybody did that, then 100% borrower lied when they approached the lender, then would these loans even exist? Would the lending system even exist? No, because the lender would know that 100% of such promises are false promises. So the lying borrower doesn't want everybody to lie the way they're doing, because if that was the case, their own lie would easily be detected. So what they really want is for most everyone else, just not them, to tell the truth about their repayment and their intent to do so. So that when they lie, it will be perceived and trusted as though it is truth, and thus the loan generated. So once again, we see an action that's wrong, and it's morally wrong. Why? Because it couldn't work if everybody did it. Yeah, so like if I want to cheat in the carpool lane because I'm running late to a meeting, and so I just hop in there in my car when I'm driving solo, then my maxim is I will ride in the carpool lane by myself when I'm in a rush. But if everybody operated according to that same maxim, then there would no longer be a carpool lane, because it would just be filled with people with either one passenger or no passengers at all. And so it would cease to be a special lane for expedited arrival to your destination. So Kant's viewpoint on morality is different than Mill. Mill says that. Kant says instead, think about the reason you're doing something and ask yourself what would happen if everybody acted the same way you are. if everybody acted the same way that you are, and it would not be possible, then it's wrong. But if everybody doing the same thing as you would create no contradictions or undesirable outcomes, then it's fair and it's okay to do. Okay? So only do things basically that everybody could do without the system breaking down. That's Kant's ethical framework. And he says it comes from reason that we're given by God or by nature. So the last thing I guess I would say to you all about chapter 9, it closes with discussion of a few other simple moral concepts. It talks about the notion of rights, and it talks about the concept of virtues. Okay? So some people think about the concept of rights when they discuss ethics and morality. And there are two different types of rights that are often mentioned. So on the one hand, there are what are called liberty rights. And then compared against that, there are welfare rights. So first of all, the liberty rights, the definition is these are rights to pursue your legitimate interests without interference. So, yeah. The right to be left alone to pursue your legitimate interests. Welfare rights are the rights to be provided with certain necessary or essential goods if you're not able to provide them for yourself. Certain essential goods if you cannot provide them for yourself. So two different types of rights. The liberty rights above, these are the rights to be free to do certain things without interference by the state or by others. Okay, so these are messed with as you do certain things that you have an entitled liberty to do. Okay, welfare rights, though, are the rights to be given things which, if you're not able to get them for yourself, they're considered too important to let you go without. So rights to be provided certain things and rights to be left alone as you do certain things. Now, since you see those definitions, let's see if you can plug in what some of these different rights, which category they would fall under. Take the freedom of speech, the First Amendment constitutional right that we enjoy. Which of those two kinds do you think that would be, a liberty right or a welfare right? Freedom of speech. You can tell me which one. Which kind would that be? It would be which one? Two options, so we got a good shot. But I don't think it's necessarily a guess. It should be easy to note. So the freedom of speech would fall within which type of right, liberty or welfare? Let's see. Which one? What does the honoring of that right require from society? Not to be given anything, but simply to be left alone and not interfered with as you exercise your freedom of speech. So your liberty right to freedom of speech is respected when the state doesn't try and silence your speech, okay? But you don't be given anything, you just don't get interfered with, okay? Now let's say, suppose that there's a right to, I don't know, food and water. Suppose that there's a basic right to that. I don't know, in case there is, which kind of right would that be? A liberty right or a welfare right? let's just go with the first thing that comes on the top of your mind. Saying that a person has a right to eat and drink would be which kind of right? A welfare right, yes, because in that case, if you're not able by your own means to provide for your own food and drink, then the claim is that society has to establish some mechanism by which you can gain those things through the social system that you're not otherwise capable of providing for yourself. So to give a person certain things like a food bank or some type of social assistance. What would be the right to bear arms between these two kinds? A liberty right or a welfare right? The Second Amendment right to bear arms that everyone, well, a lot of people talk about. Which category would that fall within? Like what? Right to bear arms? Liberty, yes, because liberty, right to bear arms does not mean the government issues you a gun. It just means that they may not deprive you of personal ownership of a firearm, which you're at liberty to own. So not interfering with my freedom and liberty is a liberty right. And that can encompass like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and the right to bear arms. Welfare rights cover the ground for all those necessary goods that sometimes people may not be capable of providing for themselves, in which case, if you believe in welfare rights, they are to be established and provided by the society at large. Your education, K through 12, which is publicly funded by the state, that could be considered that you have a right to an education. But that doesn't mean people must leave you alone. It means that the state must establish a system of education for those which cannot afford private schooling or whatever. If you have a right to have health care, which is a hotly debated topic, but I guess most think that you do. If you have a right to health care, that would be a welfare right as well, because that means that in case you're not capable of getting your own private health insurance, society would establish a mechanism for those to get it. So anyway, liberty rights and welfare rights, they're both important. Without them, we wouldn't have protections in society. Some people argue these rights are sort of natural and that the government just recognizes them. Other people have a bit more of a conventionalist approach, like rights are just invented by societies. But wherever you think they come from, we certainly meaning like literally welfare, like the welfare program, like food stamps. It kind of is part of that concept, but it's just anything and everything, including like your education as a public student coming up, or you know, a national healthcare system, if such there be. The stimulus checks, if you're talking about the ones given in the coronavirus relief package, they're given to all members of society, regardless of what dire financial straits they may be in. Of course, it does phase out for people who made annual income of above $100,000 per year. So I don't know. I mean, it could be thought to somehow derive from people's right to just live and exist, and maybe if they don't have livelihood or income, the state has to supply some mechanism for them to get by this temporary time period. But a one-time payment of $1,200 is not supportive of enough of a person's needs to be, I think, equated with the content of a right. A right has to be propped up by a more rigorous and deeply embedded system. So I don't know if a one-off payment counts, but if it was reliably done, like Bernie Sanders and some people say that there should be $2,000 a month per, rolling payments for people until the end of the pandemic because of all the hardship everyone's having with the depression-like economic and labor statistics. But that's a debated point. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. Last thing I'll say though is this, guys. Some people speak of virtue as being an important ethical concept, and so this is the last definition I'm going to give. A virtue is just a desirable character trait. And so examples of virtue include things like generosity, courage, honesty, dedication. So any of the adjectives that you could use to describe a person whose virtues up in your character. So just try to become kinder, more honest, have better courage, being more generous, more patient. So any desirable human character trait is linked to the concept of virtue. I've always thought that virtue ethics, which is another field in ethics, is not to my particular taste, not because I disagree with the content of virtue, but that I just feel like it lacks a little definition. Like, how am I supposed to become the honest, patient, generous, courageous person? They say, well, just imitate the behavior of those that are already regarded that way. But I feel like that lacks a little precision. Nonetheless, it's got a lot of appeal. A lot of people would just say, try to be a good person. By good, I mean blank, fill in the blank with some virtue concept. Well, that's it, everybody. So we've reached the end. This is the last lecture. So now with ethics behind us, we'll totally review the class for the next 2 periods, getting you guys ready for the final. Don't forget the homework that's due on Thursday to submit to me. Other than that, I guess we've had a good meeting and we've run the full time. So I'll let you guys go. If you have any questions, definitely email me at any time and I'll be replying. Like I told you, I'm kind of a little bit pressed today with some other duties that I have, but I'll certainly be replying to everybody who sent me a request for their quiz grade or anything else tomorrow at the latest. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys back on Thursday and we'll get ready for the final. Okay, guys, take care and have a good one. Thank you.